On June 3rd, 2019, my dad and I left on our first and unfortunately last motorcycle trip together. He's fine, by the way, he just doesn't ride motorcycles anymore. The plan was to make our way to North Carolina to experience the infamous Tail of the Dragon, but the road had other plans for us. Our trip began in Flat Rock, a small city south of Detroit. The destination for today's ride was Charleston, West Virginia, so we didn't waste any time getting on the highway. Soon enough, we were at our first gas stop in Ohio. After filling our tanks, we made our way to get some breakfast.
It's my legs. I feel fine. It's nice to stretch them out.
A couple burritos later and we were back on the road. Skipping the highways, we decided to take the back roads instead. The scenery and curvy roads didn't last long. Before we knew it, we were back on the boring, straight highway. Hours of seat time later and we had made it into West Virginia. We took our last break of the day, then started our ride to the Airbnb. The winding West Virginian roads were relentless. Steep climbs and sharp corners were the day's final tests before we could finally kick back and relax. Looking back, I should have researched the area more. If I had known we'd end up in a mountain range, I would have booked us a hotel in the city. We parked our bikes on a sketchy gravel incline and made our way into the Airbnb. After 340 miles and 7 hours of ride time, we were ready to call it a day. I didn't get much sleep that night. The road to the Airbnb proved to be a struggle for us. Coming from flat Michigan, neither of us were used to these kinds of roads. At least my bike was lightweight, but my dad's touring Victory was a handful. Something felt wrong in my gut. Just get out of this mountain range and we'll be fine, is what I told myself. And then it happened. My dad had dropped his bike on an incline, trapping his leg. Luckily, some construction workers were able to help me lift the bike off him and get him out. He told me his foot hurt, but he wanted to continue. My adrenaline was pumping. My biggest fear on that road was one of us going down and getting hurt, and it happened. I was worried about my dad. Seeing your parents injured or sick just hits differently. We continued on, leaving Charleston behind us. My mind wandered as we traveled further south. We didn't know the extent of his injury, and we were riding through unfamiliar territory. Despite the fact we were headed towards Deals Gap, the excitement of the trip had been replaced with worry. We stopped to gas up and reevaluate our plan. At this point, the trip was fully derailed. We'd get a hotel for the night and plan on how to get home the next day. Arriving in Virginia, we rode to our hotel for the night. My dad's foot was in rough shape, so he called himself a taxi and headed to the hospital. I decided to head to the Blue Ridge Parkway to clear my head. Part of me just wanted to kick back and enjoy the beautiful scenery. With one rider already down, the last thing we needed was for me to get hurt in the middle of nowhere. But the other part of me just wanted to cut loose, go fast, and enjoy the roads. After some much needed throttle therapy, I decided to head back to the hotel room. Tomorrow was a new day, and it would prove to have its own challenges. The news from the doctor wasn't great. My dad's foot was broken and he wouldn't be able to ride home. We considered a lot of different options, and then we had a plan. After dozens of phone calls, we finally found a tow truck out of state that was willing to pick up the bike. The weather wasn't on our side. Helping the driver load my dad's 900-pound bike on a slick flatbed was beyond stressful. Once we secured the bike, it was time to head to the storage unit. Eventually, my dad would have to return and pick up the bike at a later time. With the bike in storage, it was time to go pick up the car rental for my dad. I wish I could remember the woman's name who picked me up. She was an absolute lifesaver. We were staying in the boonies and she brought me back to the rental spot to grab the car. I can't imagine you're watching this, ma'am, but I'd like to say again, thank you. It had been a long day. My dad's shitbox rental was at the hotel and we were ready to head home. I decided to hop on the bike and explore Virginia one last time before we left in the morning. With me on my bike and my dad in his rental, it was time to head home. We decided we'd try to get back in one day, which meant a 480-mile ride for both of us. It was going to be a long day, but after everything that went down, we were both ready to get home. The long ride gave me a lot of time to reflect on the trip. It could have been so much worse, and as much as it sucked for my dad, I'm glad it was just a broken foot. This was the first big motorcycle trip I had planned and taken. Looking back now, I made so many mistakes. From planning to packing, there's a lot I did then that I wouldn't do now. I've had a few bike trips go south, and when it happens, it sucks. Oftentimes you're far from help in a place you're not familiar with. Bikes break down, people get hurt, and the weather can ruin your day. And despite that, I still take these trips. Traveling on a bike teaches you a lot of lessons. Even when it's bad, you go into the next one more prepared and experienced. The ride home was uneventful, mostly highway stretches. The weather went from sweltering hot to chilling cold. When we got to Ohio, I put my cameras away. A few hours later, we were home and completely exhausted. Broken foot aside, my dad was okay, and even though the trip went completely south, we made memories we won't ever forget. My dad doesn't ride anymore. Instead, he hits the trails in his side-by-side. Our time together with motorcycles is done, but we still have our adventures, and I'll always be grateful for that. Until next time, thank you for watching.